Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, we're keeping our focus on the call that's been making the rounds about restructuring, cessation, several other calls. Well, we've got the acting ambassador to U.S. Embassy, David J. Young, joins us this morning. Thank you for coming on this today.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
Well, this call, it's one that raises a lot of concern to Nigerians, but interestingly, at least you're here to also give us your impression. What do you think of all of this call making the round at the moment?
You know, we at the U.S. government, we feel very strongly that Nigeria's strength is in unity. And this is a diverse and vibrant and powerful country with influence across the region and across the continent and connections around the world, including with the United States. And Nigeria's unity, we feel, is very, very important. Clearly, there are concerns that people have across this very diverse country about resources and how resources are distributed and used. That's understandable. But I think the process of dialogue and discussion about that should be done peacefully and respectfully across regions and across different voices in this country.
If there were to be a role for the U.S., what will it be in trying to achieve this goal?
I think that, you know, ultimately these are decisions for Nigerians to decide for their own country. The United States is a strong partner of Nigeria and the Nigerian people, and we want to be in a position to be a supportive presence, supporting the democratic process in different ways. We help do institution building with some of the key institutions and civil society groups that help strengthen and support democracy here. So, you know, I think, but in terms of our support for principles, we, as I said, are very much for unity, nonviolence, and I might add no to some of the hate speech that we've seen recently, which is very concerning.
The IPOB did send a message across the United Nations to try to see reasons why they should break away from Nigeria. What's the stance of the United States concerning that information to the United Nations?
Well, again, I think that, you know, we won't take particular sides on particular, proposals, but I must say it comes back to us to unity. We believe that attempts to break away or break up Nigeria are not productive, that this country's strength is in unity, and again, as a vibrant democracy where the country pulls together.
You know, that those who they're of the opinion that all of those agitations in terms of the inequalities they perceive, which you say, yeah, they could go about that. But if you were to suggest, I mean, how would you suggest we proceed with this?
Well, I think it's, it's legitimate in a democracy that you have a healthy debate. Yeah. And we have that in the United States. I think you've probably heard from the news a little bit from the U.S., our side of the ocean, that we have very vigorous debates. And frankly, in many ways, we're kind of a 50-50 nation in terms of our political debate about how to move forward and, you know, how the federal government relates to the states. Those are important issues, and they need to be joined by citizens in the United States, in our country, and here in Nigeria and yours. But I think it's very important that that process take place democratically, peacefully, that there be respect for the basic freedoms of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, the important role that you all play in programs like this, in encouraging dialogue and discussion about these important issues. But I think it's, you know, one of the things that we would say very, very strongly is that some of these calls from different parts of the country for violence or reprisals, or, you know, when I've had meetings around the country, sometimes I'll talk to groups and they'll say, well, you know, we've looked the other way long enough, and if we get attacked, we'll attack back. I think those kind of statements are very, very unhelpful, and we believe strongly that the democratic process, peacefully expressed, no to hate speech, those are things that are key to making the democracy function.
And, you know, you've also been around, you've spoken to several groups, as you highlighted. Do you get a sense that if, because some tell us that, look, really, I'm not sure that they actually want to secede, they just want attention, they want those inequalities addressed. If those issues are tabled, do you think those agitations will still be making the rounds?
You know, it's interesting. I think that I think in many ways it comes down to resources and governance. And I think one of the things that people really need to think about is there are discussions about how you distribute, how you cut up the pie. You know, how are the resources of the country, the economy, the state divided? But ultimately, whether the federal government has control of resources or state governments, local governments, how much the public sector versus the private sector has national resources of the economy. Ultimately, they need to be governed well. There needs to be good governance and good use of those resources. The last 2 days, I've done events here in Lagos focused on anti-corruption. And of course, if there's corruption, if money is misused at whatever level of government, if money is misused, then it's not getting to the people. I think as I've talked to people in different parts of the country, as I've traveled to the Delta or the Northeast or different states, it's ultimately, you have a huge percentage of Nigerians who live in dire poverty. And people have not seen the benefits of development in terms of, lack of quality education, quality health care, job opportunities. A rising standard of living is not what most people see in this country. And I think that the country really needs to invest in making sure that resources and investments touch average Nigerians, average people. Because if ultimately it doesn't, that undermines these calls for different allocation of resources. But I've really reflected on, corruption is a huge, huge challenge, as we all know, for Nigeria and Nigerians. And as we said yesterday, it's not a victimless crime. Corruption takes away money from poor people.
What in your view is appropriate when we look at the resource base of this country? And say, for instance, you have got oil coming out from the south regions in some of the states there, and you have to share that around the country. What, in your view, is appropriate when we talk about this restructuring agenda for our country?
I think one thing when you talk about these restructuring debates, and it's been very striking to me as I've talked to people around the country about restructuring, that you talk to 10 Nigerians about restructuring and you get 15 opinions, And I think that it's a concept or a slogan that means very, very different things to people in different regions. I think ultimately it does come down to resources and how resources are used, and that's a big challenge. But I do think that, again, the debate about those resources, how they move forward, it's key that that be done respectfully and democratically and peacefully within the overall context of the unity of the country.
Because I know that we have a lot of people who here, when they come in, they keep saying, look, we borrow our democracy from America. They see certain examples. And then they talk about policing, the structure. It does appear as though those concerns too, because you say people give almost 15 opinions about restructuring, and some of them talk about policing as well. So give us a sense of how it functions, because people have different views of how they think we could restructure or reorganize our policing here. How does it work in America?
In terms of how the police function?
Yeah.
Well, I think, for the vast majority of Americans, I think most people have faith in the police force that govern our communities, that protect our societies. And I think, I have a cousin who's a police officer, and I very much respect, from talking to him and his colleagues, the important role that they play, putting their lives on the line to protect us, to keep us safe, so that our society, our democracy can function. At the same time, and I'm sure you've probably seen stories about this, we have some real challenges in the United States about different occasions where certain police officers commit abuses and human rights violations against some of our citizens. I think some of the tensions that exist with African American communities, some of the poorer communities in the United States of whatever racial mix, there is some oftentimes very tense relations with police departments. So, these are challenges for the United States as well as other countries like Nigeria. So I wouldn't claim by any means that we've solved this problem. And I think sometimes the perception and having confidence in police forces is really key. We want to make sure that the way law is enforced is colorblind, and it does not impact different racial groups, ethnic groups in different ways. And I think in the United States, one of the things we've seen is when the intersection of race and class comes together, sometimes that can create a combustible mix in our policing and our law enforcement.